Hi, this is Anne and we're back, and this is video 2 of the painted and quilted Poinsettia Wall Hanging. And now I'm ready to do the quilting of the petals. I'm going to use two different reds on this piece. I have the lighter one in, and I'm starting in the center, and I pulled my bobbin thread up. I've already tested my tension on a scrap. And I'm going to just either stitch right next to or even on the black lines that were my initial drawing stitching lines. And when I'm going up a stem, I'm going to cut my threads and get them out of the way. And I'm going to go up a stem, and I may go up and down the stem a couple times just to give it more depth. And I'm going to go out from the stem and add little veins. I can be really careful and have them build up thread right on top of each other, or I can go back and forth and leave a little opening in between the stitching. I'm not worried about any of it. I'm not worried about the size of the stitching. I'm painting with thread, though it's acting as my quilting because it is quilting my layers together. Not too worried about the very center. Remember, I'm going to add beads to this piece. And then I'll go back around the petal outside and work my way back up to the next petal. And I'll do the same process over the whole piece, much like I did with the black, only I'm adding those little veins. Kind of nice to look at a real poinsettia or a photograph to give you some ideas how you could quilt this piece. Or it's yours, just kind of wing it. I like to do that, make it up as I go along. And I'll use that color and make sure that I've added it to every flower petal. Then I'm going to change to a darker thread. I'll do the underneath flowers, the underneath petals, and which may or may not already have some stitching on them. It's okay to go over where I have gone with the other red. And I'll also be using this darker back on the top and the lower ones to add more stitching, which will add a little more shadow and make the upper leaves pop a little bit more. Just the same kind of action around the outside edge, up the stem, and then the right and left of the stem, adding little veins. And then we're any place that I think there should be a little more, like right in there. This leaf is under several other petals, I should say. This petal is under others, so I'll give a little more stitching in there, make a little more shadow. More shadow in that area. Just move it around wherever I want to add more. And I'll continue on. You can just add as much or as little stitching as you want. Usually when I'm done, I look at it and I think, oh, I could have done even more. But at some point, it's good to say, this is great, and to move on with the next steps. And you could certainly use a lighter, maybe a pink, or even some yellow, and do a little bit of highlighting on these petals. And then the last thing I will do is go and just add a little more of that dark. Just add a little more shadow. And now it'll be ready to move on to quilting the leaves. I'm going to cut all of my jump threads on the front and then the back. Quilting the leaves, I'll be using 3 shades of green, a dark, a medium, and a light. I'm going to start with the darkest shade, and I'll start on the center of a leaf and pull my bottom bobbin thread up, and from that point I'm going to go out to the outside edge and make kind of a U-turn. It can be a little rounded, but it could also just follow the black line exactly. And then I go back to that center stem, down and back around. So I'm just making kind of a zigzag, only I'm making a straight stitch in between before I turn back and go back. And I'll do this back and forth on both sides of that center vein. And I'm okay with the buildup on the outside edges of these leaves. And in the center, I like that. It adds a lot more dimension to the piece. And I go to the same spot on the opposite side and do the same stitch out to the outside edge and stitch back in. You could go all the way across and just make your U-turns on the outside edge. Whatever feels good at the time, just so you're filling in and giving that leaf more pizzazz. And because I have my dark thread in, I will be doing some shadowing. So up here where the flower petal is over the leaf, like right in this little center V there, I will do a little extra stitching, filling it in, little free motion embroidery, filling it in, giving it a little shadow. And I'll continue doing the same process on every leaf. And on some of the little tiny leaves, I may just do a little vein going out like I did on the flower petals, instead of doing a full set of veins on both sides of that. Adding more shadow where I need it. Want to really do everything that I can do with the darkest color now. And I'll speed it up to get through this part a little faster. You can experiment with different kinds of veins going down the leaves. Gives it a little bit different look, appearance. Sometimes the leaves look more tropical or less. Here's the little leaf that I was talking about. I'm just doing little teeny veins, just a suggestion, not the heavy duty all the way across. Putting a little more shadow on top of it. And I'm going to change to the medium thread. And I'm going to go pull my bottom threads up like before, and I'll be stitching next to some of the darker threads, giving them a little bit of highlight, just a little. This isn't the lightest color, this is just a little bit, just to make it a little more interesting, a little less flat. So I'm going in between that little U-turn area. You can do it on one side of the leaf, might be more effective than doing it on both. Get the threads so they're out of the way, and then you can just keep moving with the stitching. This is very subtle, but it does make a difference in the end project. And I will speed this up. Now I have the lightest color thread. And in much the same way, I'm going to take the light color and just stitch on top of the darker thread. This is more on top of the dark thread than just next to it. I want to really make it look a little highlighted. And I don't go on every single leaf, just a little bit wherever I want to add a little more light, a little more spark. Sometimes just on the outside edge, sometimes up near the stem. And I will do that all the way around, wherever I want to on the flower leaves. And now it's time to quilt the background. I'm using a turquoise thread, and I'm using the foot as my guide. So notice, pulling my threads up here, when I rest the foot, I'm using the outline of the leaf and the edge of my foot, and they meet. And I'll just start in one of the little corners, or the little V's, and I'll let the edge of my foot be my guide and just run it along the outside edge, the leaf or the petal. It's very simple. When I see it meet on the other side, I go back around to the other flower, petal, leaf in this case. And I'm going to continue. Trying to be consistent in that amount of space. And up from the tip, and now I'll speed it up. And I'm going to do this all the way around 3 times. Get back to where I started. I did a few little stitches when I began. I get back to that, I'm going to do a little bit of stitching right on that same spot, and I will either do a little jump or I'll cut my threads. And now then I will start my second row of echoing. Now when I get to the outside, I've done 3 rows. If I'm getting near an edge, I will not stitch because I don't want to cut that when I trim up. I don't want to cut the quilting stitches away. So depending on how close you are to the edge, you may want to consider doing a back stitch or stitching a couple times so that if you cut them away, the thread will still be intact on the quilt. I usually just avoid stitching more than about 1/4 of an inch from the edge because I know I'm going to cut that, trim that away, and I don't want to cut through my quilting lines. So this is the 3rd echo I'm doing. And so I'm going to cut the thread there. Now I'm doing another stitch to fill in the other areas, and it's a curve or a scallop stitch. You can start anywhere, bringing the thread up again from the bobbin, and I'm just doing little curves back and forth, stitching on the echo line and then going back again. And there's really no rhyme or reason other than to fill in this space, so it doesn't matter how I approach this. I want curves. I don't want them to all be exactly the same direction, so I'll turn my piece so that they're going other ways, or I'll just start stitching a different direction. Don't always have to turn the piece. Again, I just want to be careful that I'm not right up against my edge. Stay about 1/4 inch away. And I'll do this over the entire piece until the background is all quilted in. When the background's all quilted, we'll be ready to go to video 3, which is finishing the piece. And we'll start by squaring it up. So this is Anne with more fiber designs by Anne. Thanks for watching.